our next presenter, His Excellency, former Minister, Dr. Khaleifa. I'm giving you right now the role of a presenter, so you can go ahead and start sharing your screen. I would like also to make an announcement regarding this session, which is currently being recorded, and once we are done, all the slides and all the presentations are going to be available online through the Cairo Water Week link. So for those who are asking about the slides and asking for the presentations, the whole recording of the session will be available soon after we are done with our events. Right now, Dr. Khaleifa is going to be talking to us about some of the experiences he had in Egypt. Currently, he's a professor of irrigation and hydraulics at the Faculty of Engineering at Ain Shams. He was the former Minister of Water and Wastewater Utilities and the Governor of Cairo, as well as the chairman of the holding company for water and wastewater. As an international water leader, he brings 50 years of local, regional, and international experience in the field of civil engineering, water resources management, irrigation designs, drainage systems, domestic water supply, sewage networks, desalination projects, and treatment plants. He is currently the owner of the Khaleifa Consultant Engineers firm dealing with engineering disciplines, especially in the field of public works, irrigation, and hydraulics. Professor Khaleifa received his bachelor's in civil engineering and master's in water resources, both from Ain Shams University, as well as another master's in petroleum engineering from the University of Pittsburgh, United States, and his PhD in civil engineering from the University of Windsor, Canada. Dr. Khaleifa, the floor is yours.
I would like first to thank you, Professor Hisham, and sorry for this interruption.
No problem.
I would like also to thank all the previous speakers. Really, the presentation was very excellent and very useful in the conference subject. My presentation will take a different point of view. It's not going to be a highly technical paper, but I will present some of our experience in managing the water sector in Egypt. The title of my presentation, Integrated Water Management Solution for Water Scarcity, and we'll take Egypt as a case study. Next, please. Next slide, please.
It's there. You don't need to worry about the slides on the shared screen. You can.
Yeah, I'm trying to say here that even with water shortage, good management can overcome most of the problems. I had the feeling when I was responsible for managing the water sector in Egypt, the drinking water, I mean, that even with water shortage, good management can overcome most of the problems. Next, please. I will take Egypt methodology for water management as an example. Next. To start managing the water sector, you should have first the availability of water resources and the consumption for your country. Next. Okay, once you have the water balance, the availability and the consumption, we should prepare the policy and strategy. Having the background that you have financial and water constraints, and also you should look at the user requirement. Based on that, you prepare your policy and strategy, and you should come up with plans, an urgent plan to implement within 1 year, a short-term plan to be implemented within 5 years, and long-term plan. Implementing these plans, you should have a system to follow up and evaluate the implementation of the plans. And you should also have a monthly report on your achievement and indicators to see you are following your plans or not. Next, please. The water policy for Egypt, with the limited water and financial resources, the government aims to provide water for different uses, drinking water, agriculture, industry. At the same time, we treat and reuse the wastewater at the lowest possible cost. Next, please. To fulfill your policy, you should have a strategy. We need a strategy to fulfill the policy. Next. To the Egypt strategy, we work in 3 avenues. The first one, water resources development, rationalization of consumption, human resources development. This is the 3 avenues which we feel that following these 3 avenues, we can improve the water management in the country. I will take one by one and go in more details. The first one was water resources development. In the water resources development, there are some works we have to do inside Egypt and some work we do outside Egypt. Inside Egypt, we look at the water resources development. We establish new water resources like desalination of sea and groundwater, using solar energy, and at the same time utilization of salt water. Treatment and reuse of wastewater from agriculture, municipal, industry. Using of rainwater and floods, catching water from the air humidities in some areas, study of climate change. These 3 items were the number of items we use to develop the water resources. In the same time, we look at the other side, which is conservation of water resources from pollution. In some areas, we have the water resources getting polluted, and we look at the sources of pollution in our water resources. We found that we have pollution from the municipal wastewater, we have pollution from the industrial wastewater, agriculture waste also, and fish farms, cultural behavior of people dealing with the water resources, also navigation in the River Nile. These are the source of pollution for the water resources. We look at them to protect, and we work with them now to protect our water resources from any pollution. Working outside Egypt, no, not yet. And working outside Egypt, we have some to develop the water resources from outside Egypt. We look at some projects of the Upper Nile. We look at the position of the Nile Basin countries, the position of the international community, the historical rights, the international agreements, and the international law for the cross-boundary rivers. I think this slide presents everything we are doing to develop our water resources. Next, please. The second avenue is the rationalization of consumption. In general, we make the use of every drop of water. Good management for the sector, which needs good database, good planning, and good monitoring. Motivation for those who reduce the consumption, punishment for those who waste water, awareness program for everybody to know the value of water and the situation of water we have in the country. There are, if I go in details, for decreasing the consumption for the household purpose, we maintain the renovation of the networks, and we are now trying to apply smart systems in our network. We also have a leakage detection program from the networks, development of water purification plan, water meters for all consumers. We start using prepaid meters and smart meters, reuse of grey water, use of desert landscape. And most of our landscape now, we converted to desert landscape to save water. Applying fair tariff, increasing the sanitation coverage. For decreasing the consumption for industrial purpose, we on all the factories, we are using closed circuit. We treat the water in the factories to reuse again, monitoring the effluent from all the factories, especially if this effluent go to the water resources. Supervision of the workshop and all the factories, especially the private sector and unlicensed factories, to make sure that their effluent meet the law. The last one is the decreasing the consumption for agricultural purpose, and I think the previous speakers mentioned all these pillars. We are applying modern irrigation system everywhere now. We are using crop can take high salinity water. We are reducing the areas of the rice and the sugar cane, replacing and renewing the irrigation networks, and we also are trying to apply smart system in operating the networks. Next, please. Our last avenue, which is the human resources development. This is the last one, but I think this is a very important one, that we should have human resources working in the water sector should be trained and qualified technically, politically, and legally. The staff should be trained. They should know the roadway for the policy and strategy. We should also have intensive training programs for our staff, technically, politically, and they should be aware of the international laws and our rights in the water resources. They should also attend the conferences to be aware of everything related to the water resources, especially the cross-boundary river subjects. Next, please. These are the three avenues which we try to apply to reach a good management for our water resources. What I'm trying to say here, that the managing the water resources is not one ministry job. That's everybody should be involved, and have the next slide, please. Okay. In managing the water resources, we should have an international support and should have also national manufacturing. We have some ministries, they provide the service. We have some ministries doing the awareness program, implement legislation, and provide the budget. And as you see from this slide, what I'm trying to present in this slide, that managing the water is not one ministry job. It is, as you see from this slide, most of the ministers are involved, and everybody has an assignment that all the ministries should work together to manage the water in a good way. Next, please. No, not next. Well, no, I think this is my last slide, and to conclude my talk, that we have managed the water sector by having a policy and a strategy, and we worked in three avenues, as I mentioned, and the whole ministries work together to manage the water sector. Is not only the Ministry of Irrigation or Ministry of Agriculture. No, we have the other ministries also working with us. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Dr. Khaleifa, for your presentation. And let me extend my thanks and appreciation to all the presenters and all the panels we had. We had a very interesting discussion and very interesting presentations from everybody, going from a holistic point of view in research and innovation, from Mark into more specific applications on the ground and different kinds of projects in Dr. Ragab's presentation, and some of the experiences and some of the on the ground projects in California as well as in Hungary. And we ended our session by some of the visions of the Ministry of Water Resources from before, as well as the contribution from different sectors and different other ministers as well. We still have 30 minutes or so in order to finish this session and to make the most efficient usage of our time. I'm going to be starting some kind of Q&A session between the different panelists, and I would like you guys please to stick to the time. Let me start very fast with Dr. Ragab. If you can shed the light a little bit in your vision, in your opinion, about the difference between water productivity and water use efficiency. And in your opinion, do you think is it really necessary to improve the irrigation water efficiency? Please try to address this point in 60 seconds. And I also posted a question for you from one of the attendees, and you can also address that question. Please go ahead and read it and address it in another 60 seconds. Dr. Ragab.
Okay, can you hear me now?
Yes, we can. Go ahead.
There is always confusion between the water productivity and the water use efficiency, and people actually they express the water use efficiency as productivity. Water productivity is what you produce from unit volume of water. That's yield per cubic meter of water, while water use efficiency is the amount added to the plant and the amount used by the plant. That's the ratio between amount of water used to the amount of water applied. And water use efficiency is dimensionless, has no units, while productivity has units, which is yield per cubic meter of water or number of dollars obtained and so on. Now, the water use efficiency, why it is important? Because there was some papers mentioned why you should worry about water use efficiency. What's lost upstream would be gained downstream. My answer to that, not always, especially in semi-arid regions. My work in North Africa, Egypt, northeast of Brazil, doesn't actually indicate what's lost upstream is gained downstream. And even if it's gained downstream, it's not at the same time, it's not with the same quality. And to have subsurface flow from upstream to downstream, you have to have a saturated soil layers. In semi-arid conditions, that it doesn't happen. It takes decades to saturate the subsurface layers. So it's, for me, really it is important to improve water use efficiency because there's no guarantee that what's lost upstream will appear downstream. The other thing, my experience with Kawy Basin project recently in India, joint project with the British Geological Survey, there is disconnectivity between subsurface layers. When you pump water from one borehole and 50 meters away, you don't see any change in the groundwater level. That shows disconnectivity. So the subsurface flow is not really continuously will appear at downstream if you have such geology or disconnectivity. And Dr. Hisham, you know more about the geology more than me. But this is what we found in India, Kawy Basin, and also we found that in some areas elsewhere. So the water use efficiency is really important. And the people they ask for, don't worry about water use efficiency. They should really maybe revisit that concept, especially for semi-arid region and the arid region. And also we should understand more about the subsurface flow and the restrictions, the subsurface flow, the condition that create the subsurface flow, which is the saturation, which it doesn't happen always because of the lack of the rainfall, the high soil moisture deficit, in this semi-arid region. And our work in North Africa and Egypt, and my work early on in Egypt when I was working with Regua, Italian company for groundwater, actually gave me that impression that sometimes really the water hangs between the aquifer 1 kilometer below the soil surface and the soil surface. It doesn't reach the aquifer. So really the concept, don't worry about improving water use efficiency because what's lost upstream will begin downstream, is not correct for semi-arid region and arid region. And really that should be considered for case of Egypt and North African countries, northeast of Brazil and the likes. So we have to be careful with the concept that don't worry about water use efficiency. No, we need to improve water use efficiency.
Absolutely, Dr. Ragab. I totally echo what you have said. Some of the most recent discoveries by NASA showed a really anomalous desertification behavior in terms of underground water, and that was very clear on North Africa and the regions which are hyper-arid. Mark, with the changing climate, it's something that we are already observing, and we are all aware of global climate change. I had the privilege of being part of the IPCC report that was issued last year, and I contributed to the desertification chapter. And understanding these kind of challenges in the face of climate change that we are observing, in your opinion, what are the most important innovation priorities given this current situation that we are facing right now as humans?
Sure, thank you, Hashem. To get at that question, we should think back to the framework that I presented, and one of the needs is, as we look at climate change and how we respond to that in terms of adaptation and resilience, is remembering that we need to integrate, we need to take action across the different components. As I said during my remarks, the tendency that we all have when we look at these issues is to start often, not always, with the technology and infrastructure component. And there's nothing wrong with that, but we need to connect the dots with governance. And I thought Dr. Khaleifa's presentation gave us an illustration of that in the case of water policies, strategies for Egypt. Connect the dots between the technologies and the governance, the policies, a cohesive approach amongst ministries. I think this question of water productivity is of critical importance when we start thinking about the future. And of course, it plays out most acutely, as we've just been hearing about, in arid and semi-arid regions. And I understand the various debates around productivity and efficiency and saving water and so on. But I do think within that there is a fundamental challenge, and I thought Daniel mentioned this also in one of his slides. There's a fundamental challenge as we go into the future. How do we produce more food with less water? And that's linked also to, therefore, being resilient to climate change. That will help us. And the final point is about data. I think there's a really big and perhaps somewhat hidden challenge around water data under climate change, because the game changes. We can no longer depend on looking backwards to understand hydrological processes and behaviors and the way they relate to planning and decision making, because the hydrology for a given location is going to be different in 10 years, in 20 years, in 50 years. So how do we tackle that? How do we tackle that in ways that help governments, that help business and so on, make sure that their plans are robust for future climates? And I think there's a lot buried in that challenge in terms of data and information and how you use it, but also thereby in what institutions are how they're set up to run, but also what technologies and infrastructure you choose and you prioritize in your investments going forward. Thank you.
Rightly on, Mark. And since we are in that topic, I'm going to come back to you to one of the questions that was posted from one of the attendees. When I come back to you, please read the question and start addressing it. But since we are on the topic of global climate change, and I know Peter shared with us the Hungarian experience, Peter, when you are talking about the main drivers that you use in order to establish your monitoring system, how did you guys take into account the effects of climate change in those drivers?
Thank you for the question. So the main driver of this innovation was the negative effects of climate change hit Hungary increasingly more and more. Most of Hungary's territory is already affected by drought. The phenomena can occur in almost 90% of the country, causing tremendous damages for all of the sectors. Starting from the agricultural sector, of course. And in the past, we used to calculate a different index, which was commonly used index in Hungary to mark drought severity for a whole year. So it is a very good and recognized method, but only unable to practice crisis management. So it was suitable for assessment and quantification of drought for longer periods. And lack of operative measures, regulations, operative and legal prevention and so-called coordinated framework for drought management created this need to reach a paradigm shift from reactive to proactive approach based on observation, assessment, and intervention, as I said earlier. This is exactly what we expect from the newly developed operational drought monitoring system. And the results of the different climate models for Hungary are alternating in some aspects. For example, on precipitation, but there is a common understanding that the probability, frequency, duration, and extent and severity of the occurrence of these climatic extremities, such as drought, will increase. So I think that answers your question. And I saw that there were some other questions by attendees, if you allow to answer.
Yeah, I will come back to you, Peter,
Okay.
To that question that I assigned to you. So when I come back to you, please read the question and go ahead and answer it. But before we do that, let me pick up Daniel's brain. Dr. Ragab is always talking about water efficiency, Daniel, and you are big on water savings as well. If there is no groundwater pumping in a region, do you think improved irrigation efficiency would result in a direct water saving?
Yes, that's a good question. Of course, if we don't have the water being recirculated somehow, then gaining that water back through efficiency is one method. But it's important to realize that water doesn't disappear. So the inefficiencies that we're talking about, irrigation efficiency, the inefficiencies are not a loss. They go somewhere, and they don't magically go in some black hole somewhere. So that water is available. It's available for us to get back. And so in California, we pump groundwater, we recover it, and it will show up downstream. It's got to show up somewhere. Groundwater movement, the subsurface flow down underneath the ground, there's going to be a saturated zone. There has to be a saturated zone. It's there somewhere. If it's a new area that hasn't been planted before, then in an arid area, then yes, maybe it's going to take a while for the water to reach that saturated zone. But in most of our agricultural areas, that water will reach the groundwater at some point, and we're looking at long-term sustainability here. So a couple of things that were a little bit make me cringe a little bit were one of the things is the irrigation with saline water. Not to say that it's not possible, it's just not sustainable. And we need to think about things for the next 1,000 years or beyond. If you're irrigating with saline water, that should be a last ditch resort. It's something that you don't do if you're looking for long-term sustainability. That's something that you're doing just to get by for a few years, because that soil will not be able to withstand the salinity buildup over time. It may for a few years, but 10, 20 years out, you're going to run into real issues if you can't leach that salt out. So be careful with those types of solutions. They will get you by for a short amount of time, and if you have to do it, you have to do it. But they're not sustainable. They're not part of security for a long-term sustainable solution. So.
Great. Thank you so much, Daniel. Dr. Khaleifa, in your capacity as an ex-minister and being aware of the culture in Egypt and different kinds of projects, one of the questions are coming to us from Muhammad Yusuf, and he is asking, how does water use efficiency at the field level would affect irrigation system efficiency in Egypt? You have the knowledge and you have the background to tell us a little bit more about that, address that question. And maybe share with us some of your visions in terms of wastewater treatment and desalination projects in Egypt. You have 2 minutes, please. Thank you. You are unmuted, Dr. Khaleifa.
The wastewater in Egypt coverage. The wastewater coverage in Egypt now, as they are covering about 60%, and we still have about 40% of our population has no sanitation, and most of them that live in the villages. Right now we are trying to implement projects in the villages for the providing the sanitation services, but we are looking for a low-cost technology for the treatment and for the reuse, and also would like the system to the environment of the village. It's not the environment of the village is different than the environment of the big cities, but we are working hard now to reach the coverage of 100% in the sanitation service, but we're expecting we cannot finish this before 5 to 10 years. And the government putting a budget about 300 billion Egyptian pounds in the next 10 years to reach this 100% coverage. I think there is a lot of projects, sanitation projects going on now in Egypt to reach this objective. For desalination, I think the desalination, my feeling is the desalination is the future of Egypt, because Egypt is located on the Mediterranean Sea and on the Red Sea. And I think these two seas are a very good source for water to be desalinated. When I was a minister, I made a decree that all the cities and governorates on the Red Sea or on the Mediterranean, Sinai, the water supply, the drinking water supply should be from the desalinated water. Our problem with the desalinated water, that is very high energy consumed, and also the high salinity water comes out of the treatment. We need also a way to make use of it. But I think we direct most of the universities and research centers to work in desalination system using solar energy, the energy, and at the same time try to get some benefits or use the high salinity water in the industry to produce something useful for the country. For the irrigation efficiency, I think now in Egypt we are before I go to the irrigation, also we have budget for the desalination plants, 135 billion LE, and I think the Prime Minister mentioned that in his speech 3 days ago.
Correct.
I'm trying to mention this budget just to show you how much money the country will spend in these two subjects over the next 5 to 10 years. The last one is the irrigation efficiency in Egypt. I think there are the big project is going now in Egypt, which is lining the most of the canal and
your connection, Dr. Khaleifa, is not really good. We cannot hear you right now. Yeah, you know what? I'm gonna stop here. That's good. Thank you so much, Mark. If you can shed the light a little bit on the climate resilient water management question that I posted to you, please, in 60 seconds, go ahead and address that question.
Thank you. So the question came from my colleague, Imi, and he asked, climate resilient water management also requires climate resilient water sources that are not impacted by climate change, such as desalination. So how do I see the role of these sources in combination with smart infrastructure to achieve security? My view is actually that concept fits, the concept of climate resilient sources fits very well into the framework that I presented. Both in terms of technology, but particularly in terms of the aspect that deals with diversity and particularly having, therefore, diversity of supply and storage of water. And I think that was a clear lesson from the Day Zero cities that we've seen in the newspapers over the last several years, São Paulo, Cape Town, Chennai, where having a diversity of storage or a diversity of water sources would have given, and in future, as they redevelop their strategies, gives a lot more flexibility in how you would respond. And indeed, Amgad, that kind of water resilient, climate resilient water source needs to be part of that diversity of sources and storages. Thanks.
Great. Thank you, Mark. And let me congratulate Dr. Amgad Al-Mahdi on his session yesterday. I enjoyed it as well. That was a good work. Daniel, let me jump back to you really quickly, and please go ahead and address those questions related to California and some of the issues that was raised. So please go ahead and read the question and address it.
Okay, sure. The first question is what can be done on a supply side in comparison to what can be done on the demand side to hit sustainability targets. That's a great question. The supply side in our areas, what we're doing is looking at capturing flood flows, recharging those in the groundwater for later use through groundwater pumping. Surface dams, we have a lot of them, but new ones are hard to come by with our environmental regulations. So groundwater storage is really what we're doing from a supply side to try to gain that edge. Cities also using desal, but like was said earlier, energy is an issue with that one. The second question was related to the graph I showed that showed a poor R-squared value with the relationship between evapotranspiration and yield. And that is the point of that graph, is that what it means is that we are not reliant on more evapotranspiration to get more yield. Therefore, we can produce more with less water consumed, and that's the point of that graph. So,
great. On point. Thank you so much, Daniel. And also, I would like to acknowledge the question that came from Mr. Mu'min al-Sharkawi that you just addressed. Thanks for the question. Peter Karim Hussein is interested to know the cost, the maintenance cost and the data sharing cost of the technologies that you shared with us, and the cost per one site. Can you shed a light, like in 30 seconds on that?
Thank you for the questions. On the costs, I have data on the cost of a station, so it implies all the sensors together per site. It's about 6 million Hungarian forints. It means about 17,000 euros. So it's all together the sensors per site. But in Hungary, farmers also have the possibility to join our network, and they can get a station cheaper, and all the maintenance and data supply works provided by our directorate. And on the data sharing costs, following our company's policy, we provide data free of charge to the users. So we share it free of charge through web applications to the users. And on the maintenance costs, I have no concrete figures on this, but I can tell that the system constructed in a way that there is no so much costs on maintenance. It is constructed as automatic as possible, and these costs are integrated in the operating costs of our regional directorates, and half of them and the other half from projects, but I don't have the exact figures on that. And there was a question on web page where Marwa Ali asked whether it can be find information on calculations. So there is a scientific article on it. So if you can share your email, I think I can share this. I can forward this article to you on the among others on the procedure of the calculation of the index. So it's an ongoing process. It's not complete, so we don't have this information in English so far in the web page, just in very short, not in detail. And on soil moisture and validations, yes, the validation by grant measures is very important part of the work. We do it continuously, and the soil moisture is measured in every respective monitoring stations, cited in 6 steps. But
Peter, for the sake of time, let me stop you here. That's
okay.
Good information already. We are out of time, and I want to be respectful for the other sessions which are going to start after us. We started a few minutes late, so I'm going to give myself another 30 seconds or so. Dr. Ragab, I would like to end with you. A couple of questions that came from a couple of people. Ahmad Rami, he was interested to know something about hydroponics and water security. Can you talk to that in 30 seconds? Dr. Ragab?
Hydroponic is something new, and it's good, efficient, but limited to certain salad crops. You cannot grow trees in hydroponics. You cannot grow barley or wheat in hydroponics. So it has a limitation. It is good for cash crops like strawberry and anything else that would bring enough income, because it's not a cheap system, and it requires a high-tech manager to look at the nutrient sufficiency or deficiency. So the management is not for a normal farmer. It has to be a well-educated farmer to run that thing, and it is the cost is prohibited. The energy is another factor to it, and they only use that if really you run out of land. But is that the case really? Are we running out of land?
I don't think so. About it. I don't think so. And if you can talk to Pierre Banori very fast on atmospheric water generation as non-conventional water resource, do you think it's ever considered?
What sort of water, please?
Atmospheric water generation.
Atmospheric water generation is about really harvesting water from clouds and the fogs and so on. It is well established in Latin America, and they have really high sheets, quite 10 meters above the ground, where they can calculate. I had a PhD student from Spain, and we did some work on different films and their attraction to the dew water. But it's not for large scale. It is really a limited scale. You cannot really feed a community with that amount of water. It's really very limited. The limitation and the cost might be also not great. Desalination of water is still $1 per cubic meter, the average international price. And also for drinking, it has been medically proven it lacks a lot of nutrients and minerals for human beings. And they found some people, they got fragile bones because the deficiency in calcium and the magnesium and so on. So we've got to be careful with using desalination water for drinking unless we rebalance the nutrients back to the desalinated water.
Excellent. Thank you so much, Dr. Ragab. Let me extend my thanks and appreciation to all the panelists, His Excellency Dr. Abdel Qawi Khaleifa, Dr. Ragab, Dr. Peter Molnar, Dr. Daniel Hose, and Mark Smith. Thank you so much for all the amazing work that you guys presented to all of us. I would like also to extend my thanks and appreciation to Dr. Amr Fawzi and also Mr. Ahmed Osman for their capable efforts in order to make this session run smooth. We really appreciate everything that the Cairo Water Week team have been doing in order to make this event happen against all the odds. Thank you so much for all the participants and the attendees. And we hope that you find this session informative, interesting, and addressing one of the most important issues that we are facing right now, which is water scarcity as well as water security. I would like to wish you the best during the remaining sessions of Cairo Water Week, and looking forward to attend Cairo Water Week 2021 in person when this pandemic is over, and hopefully see all of you in Egypt. And wishing you guys all the best. Thank you so much for everybody, and enjoy the rest of the sessions with Cairo Water Week 2020.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Dr. Amr, are you ending the session?
Yeah, thank you very much. Thank you. Bye for now. Bye from me.
Yes, we will end the session.
Okay. Thank you so much to all.